James Webb Space Telescope, which is designed to look back almost to the dawn of time, and it's helping answer some big questions about
one of the most mysterious planets in the solar system, Mercury. This month, a new spacecraft is setting off on a quest to study the closest planet to the Sun.
The James Webb Space Telescope had been meticulously scanning the inner solar system when it paused on an unexpected target, Mercury. Normally not the centerpiece of astronomical headlines, Mercury is often dismissed as a barren, rocky planet scorched by its proximity to the Sun. But something strange began to unfold as data poured in from the James Webb, raising eyebrows across the astrophysics community. For reasons undisclosed to the public, NASA abruptly shut down the James Webb Telescope shortly after a concentrated series of observations focused on Mercury. Before we start, smash the like and subscribe buttons for more updates. Mercury's surface has long been assumed to be geologically inactive, its thin atmosphere unable to retain much heat or support any dynamic weather system. But the infrared sensors on the Webb telescope began detecting patterns, movements, and thermal anomalies that defied prior models. What should have been a relatively straightforward imaging session of a desolate world turned into a torrent of highly irregular data. The planet's night side, typically expected to dip to bone-chilling temperatures, seemed to emit residual warmth and not from solar radiation. There were fluctuating signals blinking in regular cycles deep within one of Mercury's largest craters, as if some structure, artificial or otherwise, was intermittently activating. This wasn't the sort of discovery that could be casually dismissed or attributed to calibration errors. Engineers and astronomers cross-checked data from other instruments, trying to confirm what Webb had picked up. Yet the signals continued. They pulsed in frequencies not associated with natural geological activity. One interpretation hinted at structured energy patterns, too consistent to be random. While the scientific team scrambled to contextualize the findings, orders came down swiftly and unceremoniously. The James Webb Space Telescope was to cease all observations of Mercury. Within days, the entire system was redirected to deep space observations, and NASA released a sanitized statement citing resource reallocation. The timing of this shift couldn't have been more conspicuous. Why shut down a billion-dollar observatory in the middle of a breakthrough? It wasn't as if Webb had run out of fuel or encountered technical issues. The systems were optimal, and the alignment for continued Mercury observation was perfect. Those in the know began to suspect something larger was at play. Was this evidence of something non-terrestrial? Was NASA shielding the public from a reality that could unravel tightly held narratives about the origins of our solar system, or even life itself? Webb's unparalleled infrared capacity was the key to this enigma. Unlike the Hubble or ground-based telescopes, the Webb could detect heat signatures buried beneath layers of rock or ice. On Mercury, it found faint but undeniable indicators of subterranean activity, perhaps caverns or chambers radiating energy. Moreover, the location of these anomalies correlated with magnetic readings that had been picked up decades earlier but were brushed off as sensor glitches. Now, decades-old data matched with real-time results from the most advanced space telescope humanity has ever constructed. The implications were too large to ignore, and apparently too dangerous to reveal. For decades, Mercury had been portrayed as little more than a cosmic relic, a crater-pocked sphere of molten rock offering nothing but a glimpse into the early solar system. But the Webb data challenged that narrative. If there was heat beneath the crust, if there were electromagnetic pulses repeating in predictable cycles, then Mercury wasn't dormant. It might never have been. It might be something else entirely. Something ancient, preserved by its extreme conditions, hidden in plain sight. The immediate consequence of shutting down Webb's operations wasn't just a loss of data, it was the silencing of the only tool capable of seeing through Mercury's blinding proximity to the Sun. Other telescopes, including those on Earth, cannot match Webb's position or sensitivity. This wasn't just redirecting resources, it was a forced blindfold. And the timing couldn't have been accidental. Not when the signals were growing stronger, not when the data indicated increasing activity beneath the surface. The conversation in hushed circles quickly turned to the idea of intentional concealment. Perhaps what was under Mercury's crust wasn't just a geological feature, perhaps it was a construct, something built with a purpose. The structured patterns in the data resembled more than random magnetism. They resembled systems, grids, networks, as though something had been left behind or was still functioning beneath the surface. The implications were staggering. If another civilization had left behind technology buried in the planet closest to our sun, it could mean our solar system had been visited or seeded long before humans emerged on Earth. That notion isn't new in speculative circles, but it had never before been supported by real-time, unfiltered observational data. Webb changed that. It pierced the veil of Mercury's blinding light and reflected something uncomfortably intelligent back at us. The sudden pivot in NASA's priorities, combined with the abrupt shutdown, sent a wave of suspicion through the scientific community. Some researchers began leaking fragments of the data anonymously, hinting at grid-like structures and thermal consistency impossible under Mercury's known conditions. Another unsettling possibility emerged. What if the signals weren't from something ancient, but something current? What if what Webb detected wasn't a long-dead system flickering through cosmic decay, but rather an ongoing operation? A surveillance outpost, a communications hub, or something entirely alien in purpose? The sun's overwhelming radiation makes Mercury the perfect place to hide something, ironically. No one expects life or technology there. It's the last place anyone would look. Until now. The termination of Webb's Mercury mission wasn't simply administrative. It felt like a lockdown. Even seasoned engineers noted that protocols surrounding telescope scheduling suddenly became opaque. Access logs were erased. Public tracking pages of Webb's observational targets went offline. NASA's public updates shifted away from the inner solar system entirely, focusing on distant galaxies and nebulae instead. There was no mention of the abrupt change, no reference to the observations that had riveted internal teams just days prior. The implications ripple beyond Mercury itself. If something intelligent, or the remnants of intelligence, exists that close to us and has gone undetected for so long, what else might be hiding in our solar neighborhood? What else might have been misinterpreted, misclassified, or ignored? Webb's unprecedented power to peer through obfuscation could have opened a Pandora's box. Perhaps it already did, and shutting it down was the only way to delay the fallout. Notably, this event also exposes the limitations of scientific transparency. The public assumes that space research is largely open, with data shared, discoveries announced, and theories debated. But the Webb incident demonstrates that when certain thresholds are crossed, openness can be rescinded. The mechanisms of scientific secrecy are rarely visible until they're activated, and by the time they are, the information flow is tightly controlled. It leaves the public piecing together fragments, connecting whispers, trying to interpret what happened when the silence is louder than the original announcement. The possibility of artificial activity on Mercury challenges many foundational assumptions about our place in the cosmos. It invites new questions about how life begins, how civilizations spread, and whether we've been alone all along, or merely in the dark. Webb may have stumbled upon the first real indication that the solar system is not as inert or as uninhabited as we believed. The fact that such a discovery would be met with silence rather than celebration is telling. It suggests that the truth, or at least parts of it, may be deemed too volatile for public consumption. And perhaps there's something more pressing at play. Maybe it's not about hiding ancient relics or alien artifacts, but about containing an ongoing situation. What if what's beneath Mercury's surface isn't just a leftover, but an active component of a larger system, one that extends beyond Mercury, one that watches or waits? If that's the case, then turning off Webb wasn't about stopping a mission. It was about averting a signal, avoiding a connection, preventing the next step in a chain of events set in motion the moment our instruments looked too closely. The patterns Webb detected weren't random. Their timing, frequency, and structure indicate a system with design. Even the energy signatures didn't behave like those from geothermal activity. They spiked in ways reminiscent of pulsed communication. The anomaly wasn't localized either. It spread across several regions, suggesting interconnected structures. That's not natural. That's engineered. The deeper Webb peered, the more coherent the anomalies became, until the feed stopped. Even the thermal imaging painted a picture at odds with everything we thought we knew. Heat concentrations in areas that should have been ice cold. Shadows that didn't match the angle of the sun. Reflective surfaces where only dust and rock should exist. Spectral scans indicated alloys not native to Mercury. Metals that should have degraded over millennia in that hostile environment. But they hadn't. Whatever is there has endured. It's still active. And now, it's hidden once more. The fact that NASA moved so quickly to suppress further data collection suggests fear, not just of the public reaction, but of what they might have awakened. Because once you start listening, it's possible something listens back. Maybe that's what happened. Maybe the James Webb Telescope didn't just see Mercury, it made contact. Not the kind of contact involving language or beams of light, but something more subtle. Recognition, a system that had lain dormant until it was observed, until it was noticed. And if that's true, if there was even a chance that the act of observing triggered a response, then shutting it all down might not just have been about secrecy, it might have been about survival. Because if we did wake something up or alert it to our presence, then everything changes. Our understanding of planetary science, the timeline of life in the universe, and the nature of our own existence, it all shifts. Webb may have peeled back the curtain only for those behind it to pull it shut again with force. So, the telescope sits silent now, its gaze no longer fixed on Mercury. The questions remain, growing heavier with each passing day. And above all, the possibility lingers that the smallest planet in our solar system may hold the biggest secret of all. Now continue with the next segment or others if you're ready. The implications of the James Webb Space Telescope's sudden shutdown following its revelations on Mercury don't just echo within the scientific community. They resonate in far-reaching geopolitical corridors, whisper through covert communication channels, and ripple into theoretical physics, rewriting long-held doctrines one suppressed fragment at a time. Behind closed doors, where the brightest minds and highest authorities intersect, the discovery began to evolve from an astronomical anomaly into a tightly guarded cosmic incident. As more fragments of data continued leaking through unnamed sources, it became evident that what the telescope captured was not only structured, but dynamic. The supposed grids detected in the thermal spectrum showed evidence of adaptation, changing configuration subtly with each scan. These shifts weren't random. They followed a repeating rhythm, but never exactly the same. The structures appeared to reorient themselves depending on Webb's observational angle, almost like they were reacting, adjusting, or even hiding. This behavior baffled engineers and physicists alike. Inorganic systems don't alter their structure just because they're being watched, unless they're programmed to. Further studies of the residual electromagnetic pulses pointed toward a refined form of directed energy. These pulses were not broadcast in all directions, as with most natural energy emissions, but rather seemed targeted. They were narrow, condensed, and in some cases carried harmonics across multiple frequencies. The patterns, while still incomprehensible in a linguistic sense, bore traits of information density typically associated with intentional communication or data transmission, possibly between hidden nodes on Mercury or even beyond. What unsettled the specialists involved wasn't just the data's complexity, but its implications, that Mercury may be operating as a node in a larger network. If other planets or moons in the solar system contain similar structures, then the configuration would point towards something akin to a planetary surveillance or management system, one that predates humanity, or worse, continues independently of us. The idea that our solar system may be the domain of a system we neither built nor fully comprehend began circulating quietly among insiders, even as any public discussion was stamped out with cold efficiency. Military agencies began expressing sudden interest in the findings. Departments that typically focused on terrestrial defense found themselves poring over telemetry logs and energy scans. That alone raised alarm within the academic world. Why would defense departments care about geological anomalies on a lifeless planet, unless they didn't believe the planet was lifeless at all? Worse yet, the classification levels surrounding the incident jumped several tiers overnight, locking out even those who had initiated the original observations. The data was no longer a scientific curiosity. It was a matter of national, perhaps planetary security. Then came the unexplained energy interference. Following Webb's Mercury scans, a series of low-level electromagnetic disturbances were registered by satellites monitoring the inner solar system. These anomalies, while subtle, caused brief outages in instruments tracking solar winds and coronal mass ejections. Some probes near Venus even experienced transient signal loss, glitches that were quickly brushed aside as solar interference. Yet internal documents suggested the timing was too coincidental. Each blackout occurred moments after Webb's transmissions stopped. as if a web of silent reactions had been triggered by the act of watching. If these interruptions were indeed linked to the anomalies on Mercury, then the phenomenon isn't limited to that planet. It points toward a systemic awakening or defense mechanism embedded into our cosmic backyard. Not a weapon in the traditional sense, but an automated system designed to suppress observation or interfere with data collection beyond certain thresholds. This would explain the precision of the shutdown. It wasn't only NASA's decision. Other global space agencies subtly adjusted their observation schedules, quietly removing Mercury from their near-term targets. Meanwhile, scientists formerly assigned to the Webb Mercury operation began facing abrupt reassignments. Entire departments were reshuffled, and colleagues found themselves siloed from their own research. Data logs vanished. Archival backups were overwritten or redacted. Software used to analyze the original Webb findings received silent updates that stripped Mercury-focused modules entirely. It was a controlled erasure, calculated and executed without public explanation. And yet, even in the face of this suppression, the truth proved harder to bury than anticipated. Several independent observatories, though lacking the power of Webb, attempted to retrace its findings. Amateur astronomers, too, began scouring through open-source Webb datasets, uncovering metadata that hinted at inconsistencies. Background artifacts within infrared imaging showed patterns too geometric to be digital noise. A group of astrophysics students, collaborating through encrypted forums, managed to recompile partial signal patterns and produced a rudimentary spectrogram that mirrored phase transmissions. Waves that ascended and descended in sync, almost like a handshake protocol across vast distances. No one expected Mercury to become the epicenter of such a scenario. Traditionally overlooked due to its extreme conditions and observational difficulty, it had remained outside the scope of planetary exploration priorities. Its orbit near the Sun rendered close-range missions hazardous, and its bleak surface offered little promise. But that very lack of attention might have been the point. If something wanted to remain hidden, Mercury would be the perfect place, a natural blind spot in the solar system's observational sphere, a veil of solar radiation guarding a gate or a lockbox. The more experts attempted to decipher the remaining scraps of Webb's Mercury data, the more the concept of engineered concealment took root, not just hiding information from humans, but structuring entire planetary conditions to resist detection. What if the high thermal variance on Mercury, long thought to be a product of its slow rotation and lack of atmosphere, was actually enhanced by design? A misleading cover, an environmental camouflage. The severe radiation levels might not be a barrier to life, but a shield for technology or infrastructure optimized for such extremes, technology that doesn't degrade under solar exposure but thrives in it. This line of thought led researchers down paths previously considered fringe: xenoengineering, astrocryptography, and planetary-scale systems design. Hypotheses once relegated to speculative journals were now being quietly tested in secured labs. Concepts such as megastructures beneath planetary crusts or quantum-encoded communication systems embedded in planetary magnetic fields took on renewed credibility. The community didn't speak of aliens or civilizations outright, but the terms non-human intelligence and extrinsic architecture began appearing in classified annotations. The decision to silence Webb was no longer just about secrecy. It became a firewall against a paradigm shift. The moment Mercury's secrets are confirmed, the cascade effect begins. Every other celestial body would need to be re-examined, not just for geology or water, but for patterns, for signals, for symmetry that doesn't occur naturally. The Moon, Mars, Europa, even Earth. If Mercury isn't alone, then we've been inhabiting a solar system that was never ours to begin with. And perhaps it still isn't. Internationally, this revelation introduced tension behind diplomatic smiles. Spacefaring nations began investing more heavily in silent probe missions and unannounced observational arrays, aiming to capture what Webb had only begun to see. There were no press releases, only budget increases under vague headers and rushed proposals for interplanetary surveillance. In certain circles, discussions about Mercury ceased being scientific and became strategic. Control of the narrative meant control over humanity's place in the cosmic order. Whoever truly understood what was hidden beneath Mercury's crust would hold leverage not only in science, but in global governance. Conspiracy theories flourished, but the silence from official sources made them seem more plausible than ever before. Whistleblowers hinted at symmetrical designs buried in Mercury's polar regions, regions that had never been properly imaged until Webb's gaze lingered too long. Some claimed the data resembled energy capacitors or heat sinks, buried beneath eons of crust, waiting for a trigger, not a countdown, a condition, some threshold of observation or a signal from somewhere else, a cosmic handshake. The moment humanity's eye becomes sharp enough to truly see, the system reacts. What's most troubling is the idea that the system, whatever it is, didn't activate when Mercury was hit by meteors or when probes skimmed past it. But when we saw it clearly, it wasn't about proximity, it was about perception. Conscious, targeted, intelligent perception. Perhaps the systems are designed not to activate until they detect a certain kind of gaze, one refined enough to distinguish pattern from noise, design from randomness. In that sense, the James Webb Space Telescope didn't just observe Mercury, it qualified humanity as intelligent on a cosmic scale. That possibility holds both promise and dread. If our act of observing triggered a dormant recognition protocol, then we may have entered a new phase of cosmic interaction, one where we are no longer invisible, no longer ignored. But whether we've been noticed as friends, intruders, or simply another variable in a system's pre-coded function is unknown. And it may remain unknown because Webb's eye was closed before the conversation could continue. There are even deeper implications. What if Mercury and potentially other planets are not just nodes of observation or technology, but something more profound, gateways, portals, engines of transformation, the strange heat signatures, the magnetic pulses, the changing thermal grids? These may be signatures not of residence, but function. Not a place to inhabit, but a machine that serves a role in a larger framework. One in which we are not the builders, but merely the latest observers. A machine that may activate in phases in response to environmental or observational conditions. To suppress this information is to hold back a dam of transformation. Human civilization, as it stands, was not built on the assumption that the very structure of our solar system may be artificial, or worse, alive in some way we do not comprehend. The psychological, spiritual, and technological consequences of accepting that Mercury might host part of an intelligent construct are overwhelming. It challenges religion. It dissolves scientific arrogance. It forces a reckoning with the idea that we are inheritors of something much older than ourselves. And yet behind all the suppression and redirection, one truth remains. Someone looked, and something looked back. That moment can't be undone. The data, though hidden, exists. The evidence, though buried, speaks in heat and magnetic rhythm. The universe is whispering through Mercury, and though the telescope has been silenced, the echo continues. It reverberates in the minds of those who glimpsed it, in the tension of withheld knowledge, in the collective curiosity of a species on the verge of cosmic adulthood. What lies beneath Mercury's surface remains the most closely guarded secret of this century. But the silence surrounding it is not emptiness. It is charged, deliberate, humming with implications. The James Webb Space Telescope saw something that cannot be unseen. Something that changed the trajectory of space exploration from discovery to caution. The stars may still call to us, but now we know. Something on Mercury was listening first. In the wake of the James Webb Space Telescope's forced shutdown, the silence that followed wasn't merely informational, it became psychological. Within elite scientific circles, a tangible unease settled, not as a reaction to the unknown, but to the weight of the truth being deliberately held back. The abruptness of the shutdown wasn't lost on anyone. What began as a triumphant exercise in cutting-edge exploration had morphed into an institutional vanishing act. Scientists who had worked for years toward these very moments suddenly found themselves isolated from the very discoveries they helped unearth. There were whispers of sealed conference rooms, of emergency briefings held under heavy security, with no electronic devices permitted. A strict chain of compartmentalization was enforced. The data from Webb's Mercury observations, especially the last 72 hours before the shutdown, was placed under a new classification protocol, one reportedly higher than anything associated with known military operations or deep space defense systems. This wasn't just about technological containment. It was about narrative control, locking down the meaning, the implications, and most importantly, the context of what had been found. Mercury had never featured prominently in the roadmap for human expansion into the solar system. Mars, Europa, Titan, these were the targets of dreams and missions, but that changed almost overnight. While publicly unacknowledged, aerospace corporations quietly began pivoting research teams and budgets toward thermal shielding, radiation-hard drone technologies, and even orbital drilling techniques specifically designed for extreme proximity to the sun. Investment portfolios in this niche technology spiked, although the reason for their sudden relevance was never articulated in mainstream discourse. There's a reason for the quiet maneuvering. Accessing Mercury, particularly the regions Webb was focused on, isn't just difficult. It's punishing. The gravity well, solar exposure, and searing temperatures render traditional landing systems near useless. But what if these barriers weren't just natural conditions, but part of an intentional defense system? The notion began to take hold in some covert circles that Mercury's environment may not be entirely natural. Perhaps it was deliberately engineered to repel inquiry. The severe contrast between night and day, the solar wind bombardment, the planet's unusual magnetosphere. These could be functional components of a planetary cloaking mechanism. More intriguing still was Mercury's rotational resonance. It rotates 3 times on its axis for every 2 orbits around the Sun. This unique 3-2 resonance is unlike any other planet in the solar system and, under normal thinking, is attributed to tidal locking and early solar system dynamics. But what if this synchronization was not incidental? What if the rhythm of Mercury's spin was calibrated for a reason? The harmony of that orbital dance could be essential to whatever mechanism or system lies beneath the crust. It could influence how energy is stored, emitted, or directed, possibly using solar energy as a power source or signal amplifier. That theory gained traction when traces of non-random reflective signatures were spotted across several longitudinal bands on Mercury's surface. These signatures weren't visible in standard visual spectrum imaging, but appeared intermittently in mid-infrared, only under specific angles and solar intensities. Analysts studying the raw telemetry noted that these areas corresponded not only with unusual heat signatures, but also with electromagnetic fluctuations far exceeding natural thresholds. This raised a question: were these locations functioning as sensors? Or perhaps as some kind of solar reactive switches, elements that activate only under precise rotational and solar alignment? The possibility that Mercury functions as a planetary scale device, a living artifact designed to respond to cosmic rhythms, would explain why its features deviate so drastically from planetary norms. And if that's true, then our solar system isn't just a scattered assembly of planets and moons. It may be part of a sophisticated celestial architecture. That architecture might be inert, dormant, or even incomplete. But it was observed, for the first time in any significant detail, by the James Webb Space Telescope. And that may have triggered more than just alarms within NASA. What if Mercury isn't the message, but the messenger? The signals picked up by Webb weren't broad cosmic bursts. They were tight, specific, localized, as if the planet was responding, not to stimuli, but to the act of being observed. The entire concept of passive observation was thrown into question. Had we simply awakened a sensor that had waited for millennia for intelligent detection? Or worse, had we triggered a transmission, one that left our solar system the moment we initiated detailed observation with a telescope capable of such resolution? These considerations drove an internal race to model the impact. Quiet war games and simulations were reportedly conducted within closed systems, not on how to engage alien life, but how to handle a potentially autonomous, ancient intelligence system embedded within the planet itself. These were not scenarios of first contact in the classic sense, but something stranger, a form of contact with a machine or intelligence that predated us by millennia and possibly wasn't interested in us at all, but was now aware of our awareness. If Mercury is a kind of beacon, its sudden shift from geological curiosity to informational focal point implies that other bodies in the solar system might serve related roles. Venus, long shrouded by thick clouds and atmospheric pressure, could be a second node. Europa, with its subsurface ocean, might be more than a cradle for life. It could be a vault, a repository. These thoughts echoed in confidential meetings held among planetary scientists suddenly restricted from speaking to the press. A new model of the solar system was being formed, not as a random collection of orbs, but as a highly organized system of interrelated instruments. And yet, why hide it? Why shut down Webb when it had just offered the most revolutionary data in human history? Perhaps it's not just about public reaction. Perhaps it's about time. What if the activation of such a mechanism, if indeed Mercury functions as one, starts a countdown? Not to destruction or invasion, but to the next phase of its purpose. The need to delay disclosure may not be based on fear of panic, but on readiness. Our world may not yet be technologically or psychologically prepared to interact with something on this scale. Those in power, privy to the truth, may be desperately buying time. Others believe the shutdown wasn't just about secrecy or caution, but necessity. If Mercury is part of a system that reacts to surveillance, then continued observation might have escalated its responses. There's a theory, unconfirmed and denied at every level, that following Webb's imaging sessions, a very faint high-energy beam was detected radiating outward from Mercury's surface, aimed not toward Earth, but toward interstellar space. If that's true, then Webb's observation didn't just awaken a system. It may have announced us to the galaxy. If you like this video, please give it a like and subscribe to our channel. Also, leave your comments below and tell us, what are your thoughts on NASA hiding things on Mercury? What do you expect? We want to hear from you. Thank you for watching and see you next time.